Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we are talking about opportunity cost. Now, before you nod off, stick with us here. This is a powerful concept that you need to know about, and it's something that can help you transform your finances. And joining us to discuss opportunity cost is Kevin Stewart of StocksForTheWeek.com. Welcome to our show, Kevin.
Thank you, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be part of the show.
Thank you for taking the time out and joining us. And of course, we have the other members of our Money Mastermind show. We have Miranda Marquette of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog. We also have Kyle Prevost of youngandthrifty.ca, but he is away right now, and he couldn't make tonight's show. And myself, I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke, and that's us. So before we start with our topic tonight, I want to direct you to our event page where there is a questions app. So if you have any questions regarding opportunity cost as we go along, feel free to put your questions in there and we'll try to get them here. So I first learned about opportunity cost back when I probably took my first economics class. And it was a very dry textbook definition that kind of went over my head at times. And I think that was just overly technical because, in truth, the idea of an opportunity cost is pretty simple. And it's actually pretty powerful, too, when you kind of put it to the right place. So, Kevin, if you don't mind starting us off, can you possibly define for us what opportunity cost is? Well,
I think I would like to give you my example to, I think, illustrate, and then maybe we can back up from that. Instead of just trying to give you a simple Wikipedia type definition. My nephew is 8 years old, and he was a very lucky young man recently. He won a raffle, and he won $200. And $200 to an 8-year-old kid is just a tremendous amount of money. So it was
I'd be happy winning $200.
Really fascinating. So, like any normal 8-year-old kid, he just started playing sports. He just started playing basketball. He bought some Kevin Durant sneakers. He bought some other things. And pretty much since his parents said it was okay, since he won the money to spend it, he spent it. And he's very happy that he did. But I started to think about, okay, what if he had done something else with the money, and what would be the opportunity cost of that decision? So I started playing around with some numbers, and I said, well, what if he was like a little Warren Buffett kind of guy, and he wanted to open up an investment account even though he was 8, and he was planning for his retirement at 65 years old, so that money was going to work for 57 years. So if you're just going to keep it in the bank, and let's say interest rates are 0, let's say they go up gradually, and maybe they average 2%, his $200 would become about $600. So, you know, not exactly setting the world on fire, but
thank you,
you know, yeah, exactly. So, but if he had a mixture of money in the bank and stock investments, maybe he could actually generate about a 6% return if stocks are done as well in the future as they've done in the past. And there he would have about $6,000. So, you know, we're sort of starting to get up here, but, you know, still, is that really enough of an opportunity cost to not buy the sneakers and have fun now, especially with found money? But if he had opened up a stock account, and there are places today where you could do that, new companies like Wealthfront and Betterment, where you certainly could open up an account with a small amount of money, and if he had put it all in stocks in an index fund, and big if, that stocks in the future do as well as they have in the past, 10.1% over a 40-year period, he would have $55,700. So that's my best example tonight of opportunity cost, because my nephew thinks he's wearing $200 sneakers, and I think he's wearing $55,000 sneakers. So that's my best definition of opportunity cost.
Well, what if he bought the sneakers, never wore them, and then collected them like people do with Jordans?
You know what? That's a whole other possibility.
It could
But
still be worth
know
that same
that he's worn
55.
them once. So
Forget it. It's
I think
worthless then.
I think he's blown the $50,000. But you know why that's an extreme example is because we said it's a little bit of a trick in that he was 8 and he used the money for 57 years. So it really shows you the power of long-term savings. It probably wouldn't really be much of a great example if we went under 20 years, but it really shows you if people can look long-term on their investments and can consider that as an alternative to what they actually are buying right now. It's a really powerful way to probably defer present consumption for future preservation. Especially true in that the average person at retirement probably has about $100,000, which is woefully short of what they'll need to live it the rest of their life by average figures. But could have got half of it just putting the sneaker money away. So it's a little extreme example, but I think it illustrates the point very well.
You know, I think the same economics teacher that might have first taught me about opportunity cost might have also said something along the lines of, if you're trying to figure out something and you're thinking that the figures, they don't really kind of do anything, if you want to look at it maybe better exponentially, just throw a few zeros after it.
Mm.
And then the numbers really start to grow. So if that $200 is really $2,000, or if you have $20,000, then, what does it turn into when those zeros are on the back end of it as well?
Yeah. So it's certainly a different way for people to look at things. And, every time in people's life, in your normal life, 8 years old, I see as a little harsh. It's an extreme example because, the kid is supposed to be a kid. But, maybe when you're 21 and after that, you'll have a lot of decisions that impact the same sort of opportunity cost analysis. Large wedding, small wedding, large house, small house, fancy car, budget car. You could go on and on and on, and people need to make these same opportunity cost calculations when they make these decisions. One of my favorite is actually college. You were thinking about going to 2 different schools. You got a college scholarship at the second school of your choice, but the first school was an expensive private school out of state. And people really don't weigh those differences, the power of actually taking their second choice and actually going to the school that gave them a free ride, nearly as much as they should. The dramatic ramifications on your finances 20 years down the road.
So that opportunity cost, in a lot of ways, is a way of looking at maybe the future value of that money that you
for sure.
You could have spent.
Absolutely.
So I've always looked at it as, and maybe this goes back a little more to the textbook definition of, what was the cost of like the next possible thing you could have done, and whether that next thing that you're comparing it with, what's worth more to you right now, or in the future.
Well, yeah, it's kind of an exchange, like what you're saying. It's what am I doing now, and what will I have to give up in the future because of what I'm choosing to do now, and is it worth it? I mean, you can weigh it and say it is worth it. Like, I could probably put more in my retirement account, but if I'm looking at things, I'm pretty well covered for retirement as far as that goes because of what I put in every month automatically. So instead of trying to put more in, I'm okay with making that trade and saying, well, I would like to do some nice things now rather than putting it all to the future. So part of opportunity cost too is evaluating, well, that cost benefit, is it worth it now? And if I got into a position where I looked at it, I was like, oh, maybe it's not going to be enough and I really do need to put more into retirement, then I would have to reevaluate that and say, well, is it worth having a few nice things now to sacrifice the future? It's always that balancing act.
Sure.
Yeah, when you're making those decisions, it is important to sit down and recognize the opportunity costs that are there, and be deliberate about the trade-offs that you're making when you're making those financial decisions. I kind of like how Paula Pant of AffordAnything.com puts it.
Oh, yeah.
She says, whenever I make a decision, I like to imagine that a magical genie is offering me a gift with a catch. So, in other words, the gift is, okay, you have $200 to spend on sneakers or whatever. That's a great gift. What's the catch? Well, you could take that money and invest it for the long term and have $50,000 or whatever the number was that you said. So whenever you're making those decisions, think about, okay, this is a great thing that I can do, but what's the catch? What else could I be doing?
Now, if you don't mind, let me give another example that I actually think argues against my first example, but I think it goes to Miranda's point of you're weighing trade-offs. So if you got a college scholarship, but the other school that you were thinking about going to was an exceptional school that maybe you could make a lot more money. So if it was going to cost you $150,000 more to go to this private school, but your lifetime earnings could be $750,000 more by going to this very prestigious school, then it probably would be better just to pay for the school and pay the extra money. So it really is a trade-off, and it's not like there's a default position to always take the cheap alternative, but you really want to try to quantitatively weigh the two choices.
The hard thing with that example is I was just thinking when you were saying that, oh, well, you go to the expensive school and then you'll make all this extra money. But the thing you also have to think about, too, is what are you doing while you're there? And I think opportunity cost also has to do with the time, how you spend your time and the trade-offs you're making with your time, as well as how realistic you're being. Because if you're like, oh, well, I'm going to go to this prestigious school and make like $750,000 extra dollars over my lifetime, but I'm going to major in art history, or I'm going to major in communications or something. Now you're not being realistic, A business major or a lawyer or an engineer might be able to do that at a prestigious school. But let's be honest, I have a communications degree. If I had spent that kind of money for my communications degree, I would, it's been fine for me because I went to a cheap school. Syracuse wasn't cheap, but I went to my first school, my undergrad school was cheap. So my cumulative cost, the fact that I'm a communication and journalism person, hasn't been, that horrible to me. So I think part of opportunity cost is being able to say, well, can I step back and be realistic about this? And then also, how am I using my time while I'm doing this? Am I doing something worthwhile while I'm doing this?
Miranda makes a good point with the time. I think we've mentioned it before, how if you decide to watch TV all evening, that's kind of a decision you're making that where you could be doing something more productive that actually produces income.
Right. Well, and two, if you're going to a prestigious school, the reason that you're there and the reason it's worth it is not the actual degree you're getting as much as it is the connections you're making. So, and it's almost anything else, like any career you do, whatever job path you choose, when you're running around online with your blog, whatever, is part of that opportunity cost is how much time are you spending into making these connections and moving forward as well.
Yeah, I think the opportunity cost, one thing that it does is when you have this concept in the back of your mind, it always makes you look at the options and your choices. So you don't do one thing impulsively and think that I'm just spending my money on this and that's it. Every time you spend your money or your time, there's other things that you're giving up for it. There's other things you can do because money isn't limitless, time isn't limitless. You only have so much of it, so what are you going to use it for? And when you have that in your head, you could at least take that pause and go, well, before I do this, what else is there? And if you're fine with doing what you're doing, that's great. Like you want to buy the sneakers now? Okay. As long as you understand that these are other things that you could have done with it. So that's an important thing. Let's go into maybe how other ways people can use this concept, maybe in their everyday lives and in their finances. Any example.
Oh, well. Well, I think, well, I like what you're talking about when you talk about options. so often we get caught in this idea that I have no choice, or I have to do this, or there's this sense of inevitability of what we're doing, and we can't get out of this rut, or we can't move forward, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, we don't have all these things. And to a certain degree, there are certain circumstances that can, I'm going to say circumscribe, but that's a word that you need to pull it back here. But there are some circumstances that really can limit you and make it difficult for you to move forward. But at the same time, you do need to step back and say, well, what can I do? Or are there some things that I can give up to move forward? How can I do that? And I really like what Glenn was saying, is looking around and saying, are there other options? And can I start thinking outside of my box where I've sort of constricted myself?
Yeah, and also adding to this thing about personal choices, I mean, we really should be careful in not trying to admonish people on what they do with their money. I don't like those articles that say if you didn't get the latte at Starbucks and you took that money and you would, I mean, don't mess with the latte, you know? I mean, it's just things in life that give people pleasure, and if that gives you pleasure, then you should be able to enjoy your favorite special coffee. So, you know, I think that, yes, there are limits to what people can and can't do.
I think you're right about that, but I think part of it, we've talked about it on the show before, is finding your values too, and what it is that you want to spend your money and time on.
Sure.
You know, and I think opportunity cost is a great way to help something like impulse spending. You know, like if the latte is what you want and that gets you going and that can help you get through work or whatever. Yeah, like you said, do it. You know, the few bucks that you're going to spend, but you should still understand that few bucks adds up, and maybe this is what I'm not doing with it, but that's okay because this is what I'm choosing to do with it. But we also get stuck, you know, like while you're in line for the latte, you know, you see that fancy bottled water next to it, and then they got mugs on sale, and you get half a pound of coffee. Like, oh yeah, let me grab that too. And maybe those are the types of things also that you have to think about, you know, before you make that. Oh, it's just $20. Oh, you know, it's only a few extra bucks. But those all have an opportunity cost.
I was just going to say, when your $5 latte turns into a $30 shopping spree.
Yeah, I think for most people, just being cognizant of these costs in their lives, the financial decisions they're making, just being aware of those in the first place can really make a difference for them, because so many people are just drifting through life just saying, oh, I've got $100 in the bank account, I'm going to go and spend $50 on that new Xbox game, or, you know, whatever, without actually thinking about what the cost of that game actually is. Is the cost only $50 for the game? Or is there also the cost of the wasted time I'm going to spend with that game, playing that game online or whatever, the wasted, you know, the money I could have made from investing that $50, on and on. You know, there's a lot of costs beyond just the financial costs as well.
Yeah, you reminded me of something also where it's, you know, the cost of the money that you have, like what did it get you to get that money? You had to work X amount of time or earn X amount of money to get that. Well, whether it's a latte or whether it's a new flat screen TV or if it's buying a new home, you had to put some of your own personal equity into earning that. And if you needed to earn that money again, what is your cost? You know, so if you make a big decision, you know, that $1,000 TV is great. You know, hey, the big game's coming up and you want to see it, but what are you going to have to do to get another $1,000 or whatever it is? You know, there's some cost in that as well that you can maybe factor in.
And along with that, I actually started looking at things in terms of like a trip or a vacation or something like that. We still have a 32-inch TV that we bought, gosh, I don't remember, ages ago, because every time we were like, oh, we should get a new TV, my husband like translates it into action figures, and I translate it into a trip. I'm like, that's a weekend getaway, and my husband's like, that's like 3 scale model Darth Vaders. So you look at it, you're like, yeah, well, we still have a 32-inch TV because we've got other things we'd rather do with our money.
And it seems to be a way of kind of almost finding money when you look at it. A lot of people say, I don't have the money to do this. I don't have the money to invest. I don't have the money for retirement. I don't have money for a home or for this or for whatever it is. But when you start looking at all the little things that you are spending on, and then you go, well, what if I switch that and go, okay, instead of spending on this, I could put it into a savings for this, for the trip, or for the TV, or for the retirement. That also plays into the options that you have once you start looking at the opportunity cost, I think.
I also think people should think in terms of seasons, because if you analyze people's spending patterns, when you get past Halloween and you go into November and December, spending patterns tend to skyrocket, and many people will do really great in their budget for those first 10 months of the year, and then they just totally blow the budget in the last 2 months. So I think November and December, people need to be especially vigilant on what the rules are and what they can spend, because the marketers are just brilliant at getting all of us to just go over our budget for emotional feel-good reasons, and you have to fight against that every day.
We are a consumption society, right? It's what we base whether our country is doing well or not. If we're not producing more stuff and buying more stuff, we think like, hey, something's wrong. So everything is out there to get us.
Well, and I think, too, you can look at it in terms of when you're thinking opportunity cost. I liked that example of the holiday season. You put it on your credit card and you're thinking to yourself, oh, yeah, I'm going to pay it off. And then you look at it and realize you realize, no, I guess I'm not. But then you spend until, March trying to pay it off and all of that interest. And so you have to start thinking about, well, how much is the interest costing me, and what will I have to give up now that I'm paying the interest? And that's not even something you can't even say, oh, well, with that interest amount, you can't even say, oh, well, I have some nice shoes, or I have a few lattes. No, that interest just went straight into somebody else's pocket. You don't even get anything for that. You just have the pleasure of being in debt when you're paying your credit card interest. And that's something to think about, too.
And the stores are so brilliant, they'll get you to come in for a free $25 coupon on something at that time of year, and you'll leave with $700 of merchandise.
Nothing costs $25 there.
It just they're so good at it. I mean, they get me also. It's really hard to fight it, but you have to try to fight the good fight.
Yeah. And you can reverse engineer it all too. Here we are. We're earlier in the year, so when you do make an expense, before you buy that thing, maybe that you just kind of want, you think you want it, and you could think ahead and go, well, wait a minute, what other birthdays are coming up? What other holidays are coming up? How am I going to pay for the end of the year? Do I need to do that, and kind of maybe put something aside now?
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is why we're going into opportunity costs. There's so many different ways that we can use it.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Another way I look at the actual cost of something is not to just think in after-tax dollars either. Like Miranda was talking about a $1,000 TV, but it's not really $1,000. You might have to earn $1,500 to pay your taxes, maybe payroll deductions. So if you look at what you have to earn for something, it looks even more expensive than what you're really spending.
Yeah, that's a really powerful way to look at it.
And you could also take that to the next level maybe, or extend it out. And what else are you going to have to do with that? You get that $1,000 TV. Well, now it's high definition, right? You need a new cable box now. Right? So every month it's going to cost you more. That old DVD player is not going to help you anymore, because now it's going to look cruddy on there. Now you need a new Blu-ray. And all your DVDs are no good, so now you got to buy Blu-rays for everything. Sometimes what you're buying.
And my gosh, you need a gold-plated HDMI cable or nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
For $80.
Even you buy something like a house, right? A great thing to have, but there are going to be a ton of costs besides what you pay in your mortgage that come along later on that you are just going to keep bleeding money into.
Yeah. You might even want furniture. for the house. Yeah.
So overrated.
Yeah.
You could go minimalist too.
Well, no, I really
Might wanna
actually
cut the
you
wall
can't
down.
you can't overrate furniture because let's be honest here. How many weeks did I spend last summer with no furniture? I was just sitting on the floor doing things. Furniture is important. Yeah. I guess I didn't need it because I didn't manage without it. I didn't need it. It turns out it's a luxury.
It's your latte.
Yeah.
I have a chair now.
All right.
But that's the point of opportunity cost too. Like, what is it going to cost you? What are you going to have to give up? When you're buying that one thing now, you're going to have to give up stuff later on to supplement that first purchase also sometimes. So it's more than just what you're doing like right now, right this second with the credit card in hand. And like once you walk out of the door with this thing, there might be more consequences or things coming along that will affect you. So what do you guys think is a good way to determine whether a decision's worth it for you? You have this one thing and you come up with the next best option. We could think of a billion options, but really you think of the next best option for the money. How do you determine which one to go with? Are there any guidelines like that maybe you think are good rules of thumb, or is it all variable?
Well, it's really variable. It's what personally I look at. How does this fit into my overall financial plan? How does this fit into my overall financial priorities and values? And is it going to actually help me reach my goals? Is it going to fit my lifestyle? Is it going to fit my finances? Is it going to help me reach my goals? And if it is, then yeah, go for it. If something will help me reach my goals better than something else, then I'll go for it. And of course, part of my goals and part of my overall financial lifestyle is I want to be able to travel. We want to be able to provide opportunities for our son. We want to keep up with our charitable giving. So when I'm looking at what I'm spending, I need to look and say, well, how does this fit into the overall values, goal, plan, whatever it is you're calling it? How does it fit? And is it helping you reach your goals? Are you moving forward? If it's not helping you move forward with what matters to you, then maybe it's not something you want to sacrifice for.
And maybe you need to reverse engineer a little bit also and try to be really specific about what your goals are and what money that you're going to need down the road, and that will probably give you a better idea of what you can afford to spend on today. So it'd be really good to know what you would need for retirement or what you would need to buy a house or a car at a certain time frame. So if you have a good feel for what you're going to need down the road, that probably will help drive your spending patterns.
So I'm hearing so far that having your financial values in place, like what it is that you want to spend money on and what's important to you, a sense of budgeting as well. Like, what are you going to need money for? Because you're not going to have that money if you're spending it on stuff now, right? And I want to jump in and just say, we're not trying to say don't spend on things that you like. It's not that this isn't a concept that's supposed to suck all the fun out of everything you do. But it does give more depth to why you're spending the money, I think.
Well, and it helps you really crystallize, well, what do I think is fun?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time we're just like, oh, well, I'm supposed to watch TV because that's what people do. Or I'm supposed to backpack around the world because that's what people do. Well, maybe you don't want to backpack around the world. I love camping. My husband doesn't want to go camping. So, but a lot of people just do things because that's what people do. But really stop and think about it. Have fun your way. Stop spending things on what other people want to do and what other people think are fun, and really figure out what you think is fun, and that's what you spend your fun money on.
So you can trade. I'm sorry, I was just gonna say you can trade one fun thing for another. Then it's not just to watch your bank account grow. You can you had the earlier example of saving for a vacation. so maybe you don't have that latte, so that it leads towards a vacation eventually too, not just the boring stuff.
I think this concept of opportunity costs leads you to really give strong consideration to the cheapest alternative. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll do it, but I think you'll think about it a lot more. And you go back to something almost everybody goes through, a wedding. And a wedding is just such an open-ended expense, and it's highly emotional, and it's just really easy for it to become larger than you imagined and completely out of control. And once again, if people can afford to do that, more power to them. But so many people get caught up in it and don't think about the opportunity cost of what they could do with the money if they had a more modest wedding. So I think opportunity cost, that's a good example of, it will at least make you give pause into, do we really want to spend an extra $50,000 on this event, or do we want to use it to start our life? And people do actually spend those types of dollars on a wedding all the time.
Oh yeah, especially when you live in an expensive place like New York.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think, go ahead, Peter.
I was say, I think it really is important too. You kind of talk about the cost of a wedding; those can be a huge expense. I think it's important to think about those huge expenses in your life, though, especially the student loan cost, the cost for your home, which is probably going to be one of your biggest costs.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions like that can make or break your financial future. If you're strapped with a huge mortgage and you're paying a ton of money every month towards that mortgage, it's going to short circuit long-term gains that you might have in your investments and other places. So,
sure.
Especially when you're making those huge life-changing decisions, you really do need to be thinking a little bit more about the opportunity costs and not just oh wow, I like that granite countertop in that nice house. You got to be thinking about the long-term ramifications of your decisions.
Yeah, that's an excellent example.
And you guys have been touching on this, but I think it makes you look at the why. When you talk about the wedding, yeah, you could easily spend $50,000 or more. I mean, you could always spend more money on a wedding, easily. Everybody wants your money, and they tend to overcharge on everything. But when you start to question why, like, why do we need to have, like, the super big flowers? Is anybody going to remember that a year from now? Like, what are we here for? You're here for a union to bring your family together and friends to share in this. And if that's your why, you could kind of let a lot of other things maybe fall to the wayside that you don't need to spend that money on.
For sure. At least you should give it strong consideration.
And again, that's what we talked about earlier. At least you have that option out there. At least you've kind of thought through what this purchase is going to do and what else is there. And if in the end you go, you know what, that's all well and good, but if I don't have 4 foot high, a centerpiece of 1,000 different flowers, then this wedding is no good. If that's your thing, in the end, so be it. But you've at least gone through those options, before you made that choice.
Well, I think what opportunity cost does is, if you've really looked at it and thought about it, is it really helps you say, okay, what am I willing to do here, and what is worth it, and is it really worth it? It makes you have thought about it. So many times we just do things even though we haven't thought about, is it worth it? Does it matter to me? Is it really, really worth it? And at least when you do the opportunity cost thing, if you've gone through it properly and you're like, yeah, $50,000 for my wedding is totally worth it, then at least you're going in there and saying, yes, I've made that decision, and you can own it.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think we're picking on weddings, but we could probably go into like weddings as a whole separate topic and for another day, and how and why we would spend money on that. But I think you could apply it to just about everything. It doesn't have to be big expenses. It's small ones too. I mean.
But I think the big ones though are especially dangerous. And once again, I'm not saying don't do it. It's just you got to think about it, because those are the real budget busters. So when Peter was talking about the house and all those extras that you can sort of add up in a house, those things are hard to get back if you've got to go into debt for these certain things, they're really pretty devastating on the calculator. And I think people just don't give it enough thought. Everybody probably has 5 or 10 major decisions on their lifetime like this that they just tend to think a little bit about, but don't really like spend a week intensely on what they should do. And that would be my recommendation on each one of these. I mean, the others are important too. I'm not trying to belittle them, but I think the big ones people tend to just sleep on and not. They tend to become more emotional than analytical decisions, in my opinion.
Well, and I think too, when we're talking about opportunity costs, one of the things that we kind of haven't touched on, but we've talked about, well, how are you doing your time? How are you spending your energy? But the other thing too is what is this costing your relationships? And think about your relationships with other people. And we talk about how money is a huge stress on relationships. So the other thing you have to consider is what kind of stress is this big money decision or even this small money decision? What is this going to put on my relationship too? And is it worth it? And that's a great point. And at least if you think in these terms, you probably can at least be on the same page with your partner and your family by having this type of discussion, whatever you choose.
Yeah, I think the point is it gives you a little distance to think about it, and yeah, relationships is a big one. It's not just maybe your spouse, but it could be whatever, your kids too. If you spend this on them, what's going to happen? What could you have done maybe instead with them? So this concept of opportunity cost, I mean, it's thrown around financially, but I think it has a lot of uses outside of just strictly money. Can we maybe talk about that? Like, how else can we use opportunity costs in our everyday lives?
Well, I think the relationship thing is a big one, and you touched on, it's not just your spouse, or your partner, your life partner, but it can also be your kids, it can be your friends, it can be your family. Just those trade-offs that you make is where are you spending your time? I try to arrange my schedule now because I realized earlier this year with my son starting middle school and everything else, I couldn't just leave him to do his homework on his own because, one, he wasn't doing it, and two, he wasn't doing it as he should have been. And part of it was because he needed help with it, but he didn't really want to ask because he'd never really needed help before. And it used to be back in elementary school, he'd come home and he could do his little worksheet and I could finish up a few work things and it was fine. But that's not how it works now. He comes home and he needs somebody dedicated who knows is going to help him with his homework if he needs help with his homework. And so I've sort of moved things around in my own life to make sure that relationship stays with my son and that we stop yelling and screaming at each other. It's been much better now.
So, like, time is a big factor in opportunity cost. I think we touched on it, but what are you going to do with your time? Because there's always something else to do with it. And I think you bring kids into the equation. It's an easy concept to teach to them young. It's always like, well, you have the choice of this or the choice of this. I know you want to do one or the other, but you're going to give up one to do the other. And once they start to think of that and get their heads around that, that's pretty powerful for them later on. Always looking at it. If they want to take their allowance or birthday money, whatever, and spend it on this one thing, you say to them, that's great that you want to do it, like you said with the sneakers, but you could also do this with it. What other things do you want to do? Because once you spend it on the one or the other, that's it. You gotta have another birthday to get that type of money again. Maybe.
Right. Well, and at least with a birthday, the money's coming again. With what you were talking about with your time, once you spend that hour watching that crappy TV show that you wish you hadn't watched, you're not getting that back. I cannot get back the fact that I watched 2.5 seasons of Arrow. I can't get that back. That time is gone. I watched that show, and I can't get that time back. I could have been watching something else.
Yeah, really what it comes down to is there are consequences for the decisions that you're making. You can't just make decisions in your life and expect good things to happen no matter what. If you make a decision to spend money a certain way or to spend your time a certain way, there are going to be consequences to that decision that you've made. So if you decide to spend all your time working, then your relationship with your kids and your wife might suffer. Or if you spend all your money buying a nice big house and a fancy car, then there's going to be a consequence of you don't have a ton of money in the bank anymore. So really it comes down to consequences for your decisions.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, Peter. Makes me think of the old Rush lyric, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yeah.
All right? If you want to sit there and not think about it, you're still doing something there. The choice has been made, and there's still consequences. There's still things there. There's still choices that you've given up, even if you don't want to think about it. So you could take that chance and that opportunity to think about what it is that you're spending the money on. So I was thinking, are there any ways that any of you have looked on a decision through the lens of opportunity cost to come up with the right way to do things, the right way for you, let's say? I know.
I was gonna say I have all sorts of experiences where I've done the wrong thing.
I know, we've made all sorts of decisions like that. Like if we do this, then we know, all right, look, that's going to be tougher later on. But if we want to, like you said, if you want to go on vacation, then okay, maybe we got to cut back on this. Like when my wife wanted to stay home with the kids after she gave birth, we knew we had to give up some stuff now so that we could bank some money. So spending, at that time we cut back on cable, we cut back on going out, we cut back on a lot of different things. This way we knew we had that money banked on that. So, that was our opportunity cost, everything else that we had to give up.
I would say for me, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, okay. I was going to say we recently did a lot of this decision making when we bought a house. We bought a house just over a year ago now. And, there was a lot of that decision making in the whole process. Whether or not we want to buy, a really expensive house in a really good neighborhood, or buy a lower end house in a not so good neighborhood, or maybe something in between, and what's the positives and the negatives of each decision. And in the end, we went with something that was a little bit more expensive, realizing that we may have to have some of those costs in the end. Maybe we're not going to be spending as much on other things. Maybe we won't be sending our son to private school or something, but realizing that we're moving into a neighborhood where the schools are really good. So, those are, and also, a lot of times you're making decisions with your spouse or significant other. Maybe you may see the opportunity costs differently than they do, and you may want to make a certain decision and they want to make a different one. So, part of that opportunity cost is the cost of making the decision is maybe you're compromising on what you want exactly, but you realize it's going to be better for the relationship or something along those lines. So those were all things that we were thinking about as we bought our house about a year ago. So
it turns into this quick definition in a textbook all of a sudden turns into like a pretty deep concept that you can use for virtually anything. Anytime you need to make a decision on something, you've got the opportunity cost laying behind it to help guide you. And I think we've done a really great job in fleshing out what the opportunity cost is and how it really it can help a lot of people. What I'd like to do now is towards the end of our show, we like to do a final word where we just kind of summarize our thoughts on it. So if we'll start with Tom, what are your final thoughts on opportunity costs?
Well, I think opportunity cost doesn't have to be sort of a mathematical calculation. It really is just thinking about your money. Like, if you actually stop before purchase and think about what's the best use of that money, more often than not, you're probably going to make a decent decision. Like, yeah, you might decide, no, I really want this other thing, but if you're at least stopping to think and not just sort of spending mindlessly, you're going to turn out better off than not.
Yeah, it's a practice, too. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it.
Exactly.
Peter, what's your final word on opportunity costs?
Okay, well, my final word is just to know your values, know what you value in life and what things are important to you. And then when you're making those big decisions in life, like buying a house or going to college and those types of things, just be aware of what the costs are. And like Paula Pant was saying, be aware of that magical genie offering you that gift with a catch. Think about what the catch is for the decision that you're making and for that gift. Realize that there are catches and there are going to be consequences for those decisions that you're making.
Miranda, what's your final word on opportunity costs?
Yeah, like Peter, I like to say, figure out what's important to you, get very clear on that, and then use opportunity cost to prevent using things that are unimportant, because you don't want to give up the really important things in life because you've been spending money on what doesn't matter to you.
And Kevin, if you'll close out our final word and give us your final word on opportunity costs.
Sure. I would just say be especially vigilant at holiday time, because most people spend the majority of their money in November and December, so you really want to watch out, because it to guard against it being a budget buster. And then I just agree with everything else everyone has said.
Makes it easy.
Excellent. Kevin, where can people learn a little bit more about what you and what you do?
All right. Well, Glenn, thank you for asking. I have a site, stocksfortheweek.com, and the example that I gave of my 8-year-old nephew came from a product I have on the site. It's called the Wealth Calculator that you can locate on the site. It is also a standalone app on the iOS platform and coming on Android very soon. And it was just four simple little questions. How old was he? 8 years old. When do you want to retire? 65. How much have you saved? 200. And how much can you save per month? 0. And it spits out a range. That range from $600, the low number, to $55,000. It's a really helpful tool. I use it all the time in these opportunity cost calculation. Anytime I have to make a major purchase or spending decision, and it's my favorite product to talk about on the site. I mean, I have some other more intermediate and advanced investing tools also, but I love this whole passive investing concept because everybody, even a beginning investor, can invest in index funds and look at this opportunity cost. So stocksfortheweek.com, and I appreciate you asking about my site. Thank you.
Absolutely. We definitely want to know our guests and kind of where they're coming from and what they're all about. Yeah. And thank you for sharing your expertise on this topic with us. And thank you for joining us and taking time out for us. And thank everybody out there for watching and listening to us. And until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.